The American Theater Wing and the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts bring you the American Theater Wing's Guide to Careers in the Theater. This session, The Press Representative.
Hello, I'm Pia Lindström with the American Theater Wing. And with me is Adrian Bryan-Brown, who is a press representative and has worked with more than 200 Broadway and off-Broadway plays. What's a press representative?
What's a press representative? A press representative is an every man or woman of the theatre. A press representative gets to do a bit of every job in the theatre. And I think, I'll elucidate on that, but I think basically it's someone who must know everything, be a clearinghouse for everything, must be someone who can be a cheerleader, can be someone who tells the truth, can be someone who can embellish. There's a myriad of things the press agent does, but it comes down to being the person who really has their finger, I think, in every pie, who knows every character, who works with every character, who knows the actors, knows the director, knows the creative team, works very closely with the producer, works very closely with the marketing. It's all over the place, as you can tell. It's someone who must have universal social skills and marketing skills.
That's an awful lot of things.
It's a lot of things.
What's the difference between a publicist, which is a word we've heard, a press agent, a public relations person, an advertising company?
To be really specific, the marketing of any kind of show, especially a Broadway show, has three very distinct areas. There is advertising, which is the paid insertion of advertising in newspapers or on TV or broadcast of other kinds like radio. There is a promotions person who goes out to trade or barter tickets or the presence of stars for advertising space. And then there is the press representative who is out there trying to get as much free editorial as possible, trying to get stories in the paper, trying to get stories on TV by presenting the show in the best possible light to people. And that, the press representative, I believe, is that. Public relations and publicity, I think, is the broader outreach of going to impress the public as well as the media. And that's what a publicist or a public relations person is.
So you're a press representative, and one of your jobs is to get the name of your play into the newspapers.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
How do we do that? Well, ideally what happens is a producer calls up and says, I plan to do a production in a year's time, or 2 years' time. That's the ideal scenario. Normally it's next week, and it's all a flutter. But the press agent's job is to create editorial, generate editorial by working with journalists to tell a story. So as soon as we know about a show, our job is to collect as much information as possible about that production, who's in it, who's directing it, who's written it, who's producing it, as many different elements as possible. We must be a central resource. And then our job is to package that information in a newsworthy way and get it out to the media.
You know the reporters then personally. Part of your job is...
Part of the job is
knowing.
Getting to know people and building relationships. But the most important part is actually coming up with stories. I always maintain that anyone can do this job if they have attention to detail and they have a nose for news. To be good at this job, you must be obsessive about news. You must want to know about news, not just in the performing arts, but in sports, in world affairs. You must be current with news because you're trying to interject your story into that, or your play, or your musical. And what's interesting about that? Why is it currently interesting? And you need to help the reporter, or editor, or assignment editor, or whoever you're working with, come up with an angle that they can then use. It's not just saying, hey, we've got a show. It's, why is this show interesting now? And so to be successful or to enjoy doing this, you really need to be up on what's happening, to spot trends and that sort of thing. So with a new show, you look, why is this interesting? Is there a big star attached? Is the theme of the show interesting? Is the director hot? Is this a new company that's hot? What is it about it that will make it newsworthy?
So you're suggesting that a person should read a lot of newspapers, magazines.
And enjoy it. I think, if you have an aptitude for that, I think you're good at it. And watch a lot of TV.
You get to watch TV.
You get to watch TV.
So that you know what people are talking about and thinking about.
You got it. And I think what we fight all the time with Broadway, which has a reputation for being slightly stuffy and old-fashioned in a lot of ways, is how do you make that relevant? How do you, in a hip-hop culture, how do you really pull that up and make it contemporary so that local TV or national TV or print or magazines or anything can say, okay, we need to cover this. This is newsworthy, this is timely. And I'd say that was the biggest challenge right now for a publicist on Broadway. How do you make this relevant and interesting?
How do you?
How do you? Well, you look for those angles that are interesting. You know, if there's a star in there, you may ride on the reputation of the movies the star is doing at the same time. So, you know, if you have a revival of a play, it can be very hard. If you have a very old Tennessee Williams play, you look for the quality in the art, which should be timeless. And that sounds very pretentious, but it has to be there, and you have to appeal to the journalist to say, look, this is a very worthy play, it's been influential, look what it's led to, this play has led to a certain kind of movie. I mean, you can go in all sorts of didactic directions, but ultimately it's to make it interesting to the media.
When you look around at the other people who are in your line of work,
Yes.
what kind of people are they?
I think they're inquisitive people. I think they've also mostly, you know, thought about doing something else and fallen into it. I don't think anyone crawls out of the crib saying, I must be a publicist or a press agent. Or I think they have, certainly in this little area, a love of the theatre, primarily. And they've probably been obsessive as kids about movies and TV and stuff, to the extent of where everyone says, don't do that, stop watching TV. That's a good thing, that's a good publicist. But I think the qualities really are curiosity, attention to detail, a very social nature, a problem solver.
Tell me about the social nature. You have to be a people person.
You do have to be a people person, and I think you have to be quite a politician. You need to deal with breaking bad news in a responsible way.
Such as?
Such as, you're getting a bad review in the Times tomorrow.
Oh, that's bad news.
Yeah, no, or you know, the feature's been bumped, it's not going to run. Or the photographs of Vanity Fair came out really bad. I mean, just silly little things that cumulatively add to a lot of stress, and how you deal with them and how you present them to people means a lot. You're dealing with a lot of very fragile egos. You're dealing with a lot of very smart people who quite often are at conflict with each other. You know, the director may have a totally different vision from what the actor thinks something should be, and you're quite often caught in the middle. And I think the challenge is to take all these elements and keep people not just happy, but to have an honesty with them, so they feel confident in you then saying, right, now do this interview with this tricky journalist, you're going to be okay.
But what if it turns out badly? Do they call you up and blame you?
Of course they do, and you have to then not take that personally. You have to be resilient to that and realize a lot of it is about the process, and a lot of it is about your responsibility. If the due diligence has been done, if you've told the person being interviewed, these are the ground rules, this is what they're looking for, this is how it's going to go, and it turns sour, you can't afford to feel bad about that for more than about 30 seconds. I think you can sympathize with someone, you can help them just try and feel better about it, and they'll scream at you, but that's my picture on the cover. But it's really, it is that social nature of trying to fix things, trying to make things good, and also having antenna, you know, of really spotting when things are happening, knowing if a crew head at a theatre is particularly tricky, so not trying to do a photo call at a time that may really antagonize him, unless you have to. Just thinking about little things all the time that will make the production go more smoothly and get press for the show, which hopefully will sell tickets.
When you get press, presumably you write something? Do you need writing skills for this
I mean,
job?
just sort of, yes, starting at the beginning, absolutely. I mean, less and less, unfortunately, you need to be functionally literate, but it helps. No, I think the clear statement, it is the clear story. And in the old days, you used to write press releases, and literally they were cut and pasted and went straight into the paper, I mean, verbatim. There used to be certain columnists on out-of-town papers where you'd write their columns. You'd write the story, the advance feature for a show coming in, and they'd just run it verbatim. More and more now, we're sending stuff out on email to journalists, and the wire services are picking them up, and it's almost gone back to that of running verbatim. But it takes a very concise clean writing skill to get the story across simply. None of us has time to read 5 pages of a press release. The story should be in 2 or 3 paragraphs so that it's there clearly to help the journalist tell the story.
What would you read to study this kind of writing?
I think study your local newspapers and see the style there. Look at the wire stories, the attributed wire stories, see how succinct they are. And we have very short attention spans, so most stories can be told in 3 or 4 paragraphs. And look at that style. Certainly in New York, we all worship at the shrine of the New York Times because of their arts coverage is so influential. So look at the style, look at the sort of things they're covering, and try and fit whatever you're working on into that mold. But it's very important in markets outside New York, whatever the most powerful paper in the area is, look and see what sort of things they're covering, how they're covering them, how much space they're giving to them. And then you can manage your own expectations on the kind of attention that you might get for your production.
What would you suggest studying to prepare yourself for this kind of a career?
I think William Goldman's book, Broadway book, is extraordinary, The Season. It details a season of a Broadway, a year in a Broadway season. And I don't remember which year it was, but it gives a great cross-section of what happens during the year, and it goes into a lot of the elements that are a press agent's responsibility without actually being about a press agent.
What about journalism?
Journalism,
would that help to study
yes,
or not,
it's fascinating that very few people in theatrical press agentry come from journalism. In other areas, in corporate PR, there's a lot of people who cross over between and go backwards and forwards. But I do think that theatre press agents tend to come first from a love of theatre rather than a love of the press.
I see.
And
So most of the people that are press agents or press representatives actually started off doing something in the theatre, you think?
yeah, I think, or they were, as I said, just obsessed about theatre, film, and TV, and about the process of it. And I think a lot of them started out as actors, a lot of people started out as directors, and I think they sort of heard about it or saw the effects of it, which is what intrigued them.
What are the effects?
Well, when an actor is in a show and they see the kind of attention the show gets in the press, I think it's very intriguing. I think a performer can sort of chart the progress of the show, that they are in their own little world, this little cocoon of doing a show and their own little community there. But outside of that, you've got all the magazine and newspaper and TV coverage that says that it's something bigger, that it's not just that little world. And I think that's very intriguing, because it's like when you're in school and you hear about things outside of the school. It's broadening that world. And I think that's very appealing to people, because they are obsessed in their own little thing and very devoted to that, but they're seeing that there's actually a wider world that could know about what they're doing. And certainly some of the people who've worked with me over the years have had that experience of realizing the power of communicating through being a press representative is very intriguing.
You also have to know psychology, I imagine.
A lot of psychology.
So maybe you should study psychology.
A lot of psychology, and again, the self-esteem thing, that sometimes you're working on a show where there is no press interest. And you rack your brain, and you cannot take it personally, but it's just off. Everything about it is off. The topic isn't current. The stars aren't very well known. The director's incompetent. There's a whole sort of series of events there, and you may love the people involved, which is always a criteria for working on something. You try and find elements or make elements about it that you love, but it won't click. And it's really the hardest part, not to take it as a personal defeat and realize there's certain times when it will not work, whatever you try.
How are you paid? I mean, are you hired by, as a press
We're paid
agent?
such big bucks. We are paid well.
Are you paid well?
Very well, very well.
Well, I think so. I think, no, it's not a well-paid, yes, it is. I mean, it's several $1,000s a week, isn't it, to hire a good representative?
The way, on Broadway, there's a union called APPAM, the Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers, and they do guarantee a very generous weekly wage. Once you become a member, which involves a 2 to 3 year apprenticeship with a working member, but it's and it's a program that, you know, if you're interested in as a career on Broadway press agentry, that you really do need to get into. I mean, it's a very important part of the system. The pay is great, but what's happened over the years is as the corporations have moved into producing on Broadway, there is more and more of a move to not have press agents paid directly by the show as a member, like the cast, say, and being paid as corporations. So we are now all becoming, and we are quite a big business personally, but everyone who is operating as a press agent is now a mini corporation. So the fee that sounds pretty generous is also expected to cover a lot of office costs, a lot of Xerox costs, a lot of paper costs, which we do pass along to the client to certain degrees, but what sounds generous, like a Broadway show paying, say, $1,800 to $2,000 a week, when that has to actually employ staff and pay for rent and do a lot of other things, maybe not so great.
Well,
it's
a
fabulous.
profession.
I mean, it's
Come
fabulous.
on.
We do great. We do great. No, and it's, but no, it is very rewarding in a lot of ways. I think, you know,
of course, things
corporate PR would certainly be. If you're really just purely interested in public relations, I recommend going into corporate PR, where you can really make money. But most of the people
they're not in the theater.
They're not in the theater.
This is a theatrical. Don't you feel part of the team, the theater
Absolutely.
community?
And well, it's more. I think we feel more part of the individual productions, which then make up the community.
Yes.
And I think why we're also in it, which I should have mentioned right up front, is that it is a totally live experience. In professional theater on Broadway, it happens 8 times a week. Every time it's different. There's elements that are different. The personnel changes all the time. The environment changes all the time. If you're working on a new TV show or a movie, you build to one incredibly intensive weekend, and that's it. And you don't necessarily meet anyone involved with the production. You have a videotape that you send out to people. You call them up and say, do you want to interview someone who's on this videotape? With the theater, you are interacting every day with all the different elements that I mentioned earlier on, with the stage management, with the stage hands, with the actors, with the director, with the designers. And that keeps going for the run of the show. And it becomes a very tight relationship and a very close community. And I think that's why people really get into it. I mean, I joke about the money. Of course, we're pretty well paid. But it really is about that community and that sense of participation, which we tell ourselves you do not feel when you're selling Green Giant. I mean, it's a whole mindset. And with it comes the stress of that, too, knowing that every day you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if a star is going to be out of a show that night. And how do you deal with that? You don't know if, God forbid, your star is caught drunk in some club somewhere. All these things can happen. All these variables happen. And to be successful, you just have to deal with it step by step and not let it get to you when a series of terrible things happen.
There are a lot of contemporary things that you're using videotape that I know you send out now of shows.
Yep.
And do you use the internet as well to promote the show?
So much
Everything.
now. I mean, most journalists that we deal with now want to get their information by email. And that's a change that's happened in the past 2 or 3 years. Whereas before it was like, please send me a press kit. And you had this feeling that they arrived and they went, boom.
Into the wastepaper basket.
But no, and I mean, the good thing about it is it's incredibly fast and efficient. The bad thing about it is it's very impersonal. Yeah. And reaching people is a lot harder now. You can reach their computer, but actually getting them, you know, you get voicemail all the time. And I think that there's also what I call the tennis syndrome, too, of feeling that once you've sent the email, it then becomes their responsibility. It's over the net. And not the personal interaction, the gauging on the phone how someone is, and that feeling of, you know, I've obviously got them at a bad time, I should call later, of, you know, the personal pitch, if you like, that is so important. That, you know, there's a good story, but if it's pitched at the wrong time, it won't land. And I think we're losing that because of this efficiency of communicating information.
A little bit about your background. How did you wend your way into this?
When did I into this? It's funny because I've having been doing this 20 years now, I've been doing quite a bit of self-analysis about why. Apart from that community we talked about, you know, why did it go in this direction? I was a biology major. I was very lucky in that I was transcontinental, I guess. I lived in London and New York as a kid.
We can hear you're a Brit.
I'm happy to be a citizen of America. No, but I was always fascinated by theatre and film, but I didn't know what a publicist was. And certainly when I was in school, there was no training programs for marketing, publicity, or anything like that. And I partly as a deal with my folks, who said, if you get a degree in something sensible like biology, we'll let you go to film school.
So
I blackmailed them. And so I did that. I went to film school for a while, and it was fun, but I figured I just wanted to get out there and go.
And that was in California?
That was in California. And I'm a child of New York. It's where the theatre is. But
so you left California and came back specifically to go into the theatre, or you didn't know?
I didn't know. But I just knew that New York was it, and I had that feeling about the environment of theatre. I mean, I was a very spoilt, lucky kid in that I was taken to a lot of theatre growing up in New York, and some in London too. So I was a big fan, but I had no idea of how I could apply myself in it. And I really just fell into it. I just started interning in someone's office who was a publicist, and you know what I've recognized now is the training was that obsession with news, the obsession with reading everything, the obsession with picking up a golf magazine, which I'm not particularly interested in golf, but looking through it to see what was relevant to me or what I could make relevant. And even now when I go to airports and they have free magazines out there, I pick up everything just to see if there's some angle or some way that I can get Broadway in there. Huh. And I think that is the mindset, and that's really what made me jazzed and excited about it was thinking, here's an airline magazine, what more could they do to promote Broadway? Or I'm listening to the headsets on the airline thinking, why aren't they playing more Broadway music? And I think that's how I got into it. I just really started interning in an office, and after 3 months I said, look, I need to actually pay the rent. And they said, okay, we'll start paying you.
Oh!
What a treat. But I think that's a very common entry. I mean, certainly a lot of the younger people who start in our office come as a summer internship from one of the college programs. And if they feel they have the aptitude and they like it, then they start at a very minimal salary.
If you were able to start again, what would you have studied? What courses would you recommend besides biology?
Besides biology,
I hope was useful
yes,
somewhere.
I'm very bad, and I say it's animals actors. But no,
what do you think? What courses would be useful?
What courses would be useful? I think I do think journalism courses would be useful. I do think English would be useful. Even though we are writing less and less, I regret I don't have a better command of English. I mean, I just find it so great when I see something written concisely and eloquently. And I've trained myself to do that, but I'd love to have more background in that. And I think pop culture courses. I think supporting that interest, and we now have a legacy of over 100 years of film and 50 years of TV, and I think watching that process, watching how things have changed, and how the market has changed, in that we don't have one market. You can't just have something on the Ed Sullivan Show now impress the nation. Nothing like that happens anymore. And we spend a lot of our time looking for the places that will really push buttons in people and get them interested in theatre. And I don't know what course that is, but I think a lot of it is to do with popular culture, and a lot of it is some marketing, which I believe you can study now. Which again, when I was growing up,
they didn't have.
That wasn't there. It was internal training.
So I understand journalism, English, writing, psychology.
Yeah, psychology. Yeah.
Psychologists, I would think that, because what happens in today, everybody has a press agent. Do you have to deal, or press representative? Do you have to then deal, you're representing the show, you have to deal with the actors' press agent, so the two of you have to deal.
It's quite a game. It is a lot of juggling, and it requires a lot of patience. But a lot of actors do have press representation, which I think is fine. I mean, they have a need for it. And it's also something I'm not particularly interested in doing. I don't want to be a personal press representative. Different role.
Oh, really?
Well,
tell me why it's
much
so
more
different.
I'm there to sell the show. I want to sell all aspects of the show, but ultimately I'm paid by the producers to sell the show.
You don't want to sell
I will
Nathan
sell,
Lane.
I absolutely I want to sell Nathan Lane,
Oh,
because
but
every
not
time he's out
separate
there,
from his show.
he's selling the producers.
Oh.
But Nathan Lane also has a career beyond the producers.
Yes.
He is going to do movies and other Broadway shows and so forth, and so he might not necessarily need to or want to do, and I'm just using this as an example, I don't know what he thinks, but he's not necessarily going to want to do a lot of publicity. He may feel he doesn't need to. He may not want to be so totally identified with the producers that when he goes on to his next role, everyone says, oh, but it's just like he was in the producers. So there is a fine line which becomes more like personal management that a personal press agent is responsible for, that is very complicated and is sometimes at conflict with what we need to do. Whereas we'd like our stars to be out doing everything 24 hours a day, as long as it doesn't affect their performance and we are really nice people and we don't want to hurt them. But no, really, I mean, you know, you just, whereas a personal press representative also has to break personal news. If I tell my producers that Ben Brantley doesn't like their show in the New York Times, they're going to be mad, but they're not going to take it that personally. If I have to go up to a leading lady and saying, you're going to be really zapped tomorrow, although I'd never say it like that.
How would you say it?
I'd say, hey, I don't think Ben likes it too much. You know, just...
Don't read the paper tomorrow?
Do not read the paper. And that's okay, because no one ever reads their reviews.
They all say that.
Yes, but it's amazing. It's amazing how the next day you get a call saying, what was that, word goes here, saying in the paper? How dare he? Which performance did he come to?
Oh, my gosh. Well, tell me a little bit about the day-to-day operations.
Okay.
I know, as being myself a theater reviewer for some years,
right.
people like you would be there with the tickets.
You got it.
That's, you know, and then you'd seat the critics in different places.
Right. Let me do the whole process so that we're not all over the place. So we start with, we hear the show's going to happen.
Yes.
A producer calls up, hopefully, and says, we want you to do the press for our show, which is happening in 2 years' time. Quite often they call up and say, we're speaking to several people, in which you go, all right, you eye roll and think, oh, thanks a lot.
Right. Competition right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning. So you hear you're doing the show. You immediately assemble as much information as you can about it, who the creative team is, who's in it if you know anything, what theatre it's going to, when you plan to open. You strategize with the producers on when you want to open. There are certain times of year.
Astrology? What do you mean?
Really, absolutely. It's,
You're kidding.
Mercury's in retrograde. No, it's very important to maximize the visibility you can get in the media if you have that luxury. Normally producers just have to go when a theatre is ready. But the best times to get the most attention from the media is specifically on a Friday, because there's bigger entertainment sections in all the papers.
Oh, so they should open on Thursday.
So you open
so
on
they
a
get
Thursday
into
night,
the Friday
so you get into
paper.
Friday paper. You know, having full confidence in your show that you want as much exposure on that opening as possible. Certain times of year, January and February are a pretty bad time of year to open. I mean, it may be good for the media, but people aren't going to the theatre. The weather's lousy, they've just spent lots of money over the holidays. So, you know, you try and strategize not to open then, even though from a press point of view it might be very good, but the audience response may not be so good.
I see.
So that's a very early discussion. What's the best time of year?
And you're included in all the discussions?
We
once you're hired?
Once we're hired, but because, you know, if, for instance, we'll be asked, and this is pretty awful, we'll be asked like a Q rating on someone. If they're thinking of hiring an actor.
We have to explain what the Q rating is.
What's their, if you like, audience and press likability? Are they overexposed? Is there someone who's been so interviewed that they're not going to get any press? And this is a consideration quite often with some producers on, especially hiring replacements when a show has been running. You know, how much press will this person do to give us the visibility that will hopefully sell tickets? So we are very involved in that.
And that's like casting.
It's very like casting.
I mean, so you're involved in the casting because you'll say, I'm sorry, I can't get any press on that person? You wouldn't say that.
I know I wouldn't say
that. Yes, no, I would say that. Than I did.
No, I would definitely say
you would
that.
Say that.
I said, are you kidding? What are you thinking?
Oh, really?
No, but it's smart producers will take that as an element. Obviously, they need someone who's very good artistically in the role, and you'll work with the creative team on that. But if this is pretty so evident to anyone who's working on the show or watching what's happening around it, if someone is so overexposed that there is concern that they won't get any press, it is a consideration. The producer's laying out a lot of risk. And once a show has been running a couple of years, to be quite cynical, it is about the marketing of the show to keep it running, to recoup as much investment or to make a profit as you can. And not that the artistic integrity slips, but these factors become more in play.
Well, and very often the stars change.
Great opportunity.
It could be.
And it's quite often not the star's fault, too, when they come in when a show has been running a long time and they don't sell the tickets. The show is just played out.
Right.
So I'm sorry, we're digressing from the... So we strategize of when to open. Once we've set that date, we then pitch magazines and long lead television on doing stories about the show.
What's long lead television?
Long lead is television that needs more time to turn around or is very booked.
The morning
Regis
shows
or Rosie O'Donnell, they book quite far out. They book several months sometimes, or if it's a very hot star, they'll take them next week. But you need to plan 2 or 3 months ahead to book stars, should you be lucky enough to have them, and should the shows be interested that far out.
So you have to know somebody on Rosie O'Donnell's show or Regis's show personally that you call. You have to know.
Or you just need to know the phone number, because if I call and say I have Stacey Keach in a show and he wants to come on, I will. Anyone can call up to Rosie and say who's the talent booker or who's the producer, and they may get sent around. But it's the story you have to offer. So yes, I have a shorthand. My staff has a shorthand because they've been working with the community for a long time. But anyone can do it if they have that story right. I'm not saying that everyone should just call up Rosie and annoy her, but that's how it works. It is about relationships, but it's more importantly about the quality of the story. So we start booking. We start booking. We start working on long lead magazines. We'll call up Vanity Fair and say we have a really sexy hot cast for this new show. Can we do a photo of them?
Those are the words you always use. Sexy hot.
If they are. And they go, oh,
so
yeah?
So you have to, yes,
and
you
they
have
call,
to think
you
of all...
call so-and-so sexy and hot. No, then you try and set up as much long lead magazine stuff as possible, bearing in mind that theatre in the pecking order is several notches below film, TV, and music, which will, in the glossies, always have a priority, unless it's someone crossing over from those fields into theatre. So that is where there's a lot of, again, building the story. Why is this interesting? Why is this more interesting than Christina Aguilera? What is there about this that will appeal to a national audience? We're talking a little Broadway show here.
Right.
And that pitch goes on. We then start planning the front of house. Our responsibility is with the advertising agency to take care of the decoration of the theatre.
You personally are out there nailing up
No, we're not personally out there, but we are responsible for a lot of elements out there.
Really?
There are
the outside of the theatre
the outside
as well?
of the theatre. There are several union regulations, specifically equity on what kind of posting must be outside, what cast boards must be outside, and in the lobby of the theatre. And it falls to us to just check that's happening. No, we don't physically do it.
But I've seen some theatres where they bring the show partially into the theatre and into the lobby. They'll carry themes.
Right. I mean, the aesthetic design is not so much our mandate, if you like, but it's really the details of making sure that the billing follows labour regulations. There's a full cast board outside with listing every equity member. And also from a public relations rather than press point of view, it's great to have a theatre front up as soon as you can. As soon as the theatre is available to you, you have a billboard there. I mean, you have signage out there. You also have a space that, if you have a star, you can take a picture of them outside. It lends credibility to them.
Do you arrange for the photographs and the photographer?
Yes. Part of our responsibility is for the production photographs which are given to the press, or the production video, which is made for the press. It is our responsibility to hire photographers and videographers to do that. Quite often there will also be a photographer who does advertising portraiture, which is different in that it's got nothing to do with the show. It's just to make the stars look great, or the company look great to sell the show.
So you have to have some knowledge of all of these areas.
We do have to have knowledge of all
you
these
have to
areas.
know which camera crew to hire
Right,
and what.
and we also become involved with the photo approvals of a lot of the actors involved, and it's our responsibility to take them photographs and show them and talk them through and persuade them that they look great.
They look thin and
you
young.
Look fabulous. That's very much our responsibility, and that is major psychology.
Yeah.
The idea of you take in 10 shots knowing that 3 are just terrible, and so they have something to kill. So
Really?
So they can feel good about
Saying,
eliminating shots. And what
Well,
9 times out of 10 what happens is they choose one they like, which is one of the terrible shots, and you're like, oh no.
No.
No, I firmly believe
So
that.
you've learned a lot of tricks, it
Yeah.
sounds like, dealing with.
But I firmly believe no actor should judge their headshot. They should have a friend or a manager do it, because I think it's very hard for anyone to judge how they look.
That's true.
And that's funny. So
now
okay.
you've got the theatre
So we're
done.
getting, what's happening is
Yes.
we're building an arsenal. You know, we've got the look of the show down. We've got information about the show starting to go out. We're collecting photography. We're collecting a lot of information, and we're disseminating it as people need it and meeting their deadlines for magazines 3 or 4 months out. And then as we get closer and the show goes into rehearsal, we may take the opportunity to invite the press to come watch the rehearsal. Again, more information, including the press, making them feel that they're part of it, making them feel proud quite often that this is happening. And when that works well, it's extraordinary. And so we stage something. We work with the director and the creative team to, at rehearsals, run 2 or 3 numbers in rehearsal. No costumes, just with a piano, so they can show a bit of what the show is going to look like. And it's also a chance for the press to meet the company in a very controlled environment. I mean, it's a great way to deal if you have a star who's, say, had some personal problems and doesn't really want to talk about them. It's very hard for a journalist to jump right in with personal questions in that environment. And so it's a very effective way, especially on big musicals, to start introducing what the musical is about.
And how do you know which journalists to invite?
Well, there's a core team, I mean, in New York that is, you know, is interested, and then you quite often go outside that, depending on who's involved. If the design of the show is particularly interesting and you've got some great set models there, you might go to the fine arts pages and just out of the blue call up someone, say, look, you don't normally cover theatre, but you might find this interesting. You know, so David Hockney's designed this set, and you should come down and have a look. So it's that is legwork that we do fresh on every show. We have this core audience, but you think, who else could this appeal to? You know, if it's, say, Pete Townsend doing the Who's Tommy, obviously there's a whole rock and roll press that would not be interested in Broadway normally. Right. But you may not even know who they are, but you look up their names in the paper or you see them on TV and you just call them up and say, this is happening, you might be interested.
So one of the qualifications is a kind of courage to just call up people you don't know and pitch story ideas.
But it's only hard to do when you're not confident in the story. So it's positioning yourself that you feel good about it and also not abusing it. You know, when you know, or you don't know, but when you feel, you know, this doesn't feel good, this doesn't feel strong enough. You know, I'm not going to bother them. I'm not going to use up this one favor. You know, I'm going to, when I call, it should be, I think this is important. It shouldn't be because you have to. You shouldn't just call out, oh, I'm doing this new show, you ought to cover it. There should be a very specific reason, especially when you start to build the relationships with people. And they're going to say, well, should I do it? And the press is going to say, is this worth me doing? And they have to trust me when I say, you know what, this one really is worth coming to. So not that I'd ever say anything wasn't worth coming to.
You'd use better words. You'd
Yes,
find ways
yeah,
to say it. Perhaps not this time.
No,
I'd say,
you know, you're going to be busy next week, right?
Yeah. So another qualification or quality that a press representative needs is trustworthiness, or an aspect of trustworthiness.
Do you mind? No, it is absolutely, there has to be an integrity and there has to be an honesty.
Right.
You don't have to say something terrible happened in connection with the production, but everything you say should be the absolute truth and should be direct. It should be straightforward. This is what's happening. This is how it's going. And if someone does say, you know, I heard so-and-so walked out of rehearsal, isn't coming back, you can't lie, you know, because ultimately it becomes an even bigger explosion. And so that is something you learn with experience too. And to also know that you don't have to give a knee-jerk response. I mean, it's absolutely valid if a press representative is called by the media to say, I heard something terrible happen, to say, I need to check that out, I'll get back to you. And I think it's tempting when you're starting to say, oh, I haven't heard anything about that, and get flustered, which immediately sends out a signal that there's major problems.
Then they write it immediately.
And that's experience. I mean,
Yes.
that's part of doing it for a little while, and just learning the balance of what's real. We're not very often in life and death situations in what we do. And keeping that balance is really important. Right, materials.
We were at the theater.
Yeah, we're at the theater.
We've
decorated the theater. We're assembling stuff. We're in
Yes.
rehearsals. The thing that happens also at this point is, prior to rehearsals, if you're lucky enough to be working everyone, it's all sort of very comfortable and easygoing. As soon as rehearsals start, all sorts of different stresses come in. Actors have to learn lines. Directors have to feel confident about what they're doing. Designers don't have enough money to finish their sets. So the pressures on everyone become extraordinary. And the number of relationships that are developed in a very short time also become huge. So it's a very tense time. And it's choosing the moment to ask an actor to do a morning of interviews when they've been working solidly for a week. It's, and that's where the antenna come back of being really sensitive to what's going on, bonding really well with your stage manager, so you can call and say at the end of the day, how are rehearsals going? Is this a good time to ask someone to do an interview? And if you have that good relationship, they're going to say, you know what, they're really fried. Call them in the morning. And I think that's something you learn too, but it's a social skill of just really being sensitive to that. So it's getting very tense in rehearsals, but it's also very exciting. And then we're getting close to the first preview. During this time, we're also assembling the playbill. It's our responsibility to collect the biographies from everyone involved with the production and get that over to playbill or stage bill, whoever is doing the program for the theatre. That tends to have a sort of 2-week deadline from the first public performance. So there's a lot of cajoling and persuading actors to run shorter bios. Because it costs the producer, they run very long bios. Also, there's an aesthetic from a lot of producers that they don't want people thanking their dogs and so forth. But they're allowed to. I mean, Equity has considered that, and they are allowed to say whatever they want in their bio. So again, it's the politics of saying, you know what, I don't think you really want the critics reading this before the show opens. Maybe you shouldn't put this in right now, and hopefully they'll then not, once you've opened, want to put it back. So putting together the playbill is a very important part. So we're getting to the first preview. Most shows in New York or on Broadway tend to preview for at least 2 or 3 weeks. You've set your dates, so the press knows when they can come to review in general terms, but you haven't necessarily been specific. It's been tradition for more than 20 years now that critics come prior to the actual opening night. And so we send out a formal invitation. I tend to wait till the last dress rehearsal to actually send out that invitation, just in case something technically is screwed up. Right. We've already pulled the locations because the tickets have been on sale, so we have locations for several performances around the opening, but we don't invite the critics till right before previews, in case there's some major technical problem, in case there's a casting issue where someone is being replaced, God forbid. So then there's a bit of a scramble right before that. We also try and get some picture placement in local papers right around that time, to sort of alert that the show's beginning previews. We'll send out press releases by email and fax, just notifying that performances are beginning, just because a couple of columns may pick it up.
So you need to sort of build toward
you
opening night.
You build, right.
And then you go through the previews.
So you're going through the previews, during which time you quite often shoot your photography. I mean, at the very first preview, because that's the first time that all the elements will be together, where the set, the costumes, and everything will be together. So that's where you'll have probably done some rehearsal photography before, but they're not in costume. So that's when you'll get that. It's when you'll make the video that you're going to hand out to the TV stations. And it's also when a lot of the daily press will happen. Yeah. Interviews
so
with the daily
that's
papers.
Your big
so
push.
It's the big push, and it's very intense around that time. But all the groundwork has been laid. I mean, this is just now dealing with the stuff on the shorter deadlines. But all the magazine stuff and all the major broadcast stuff will either be in place or in progress at that point.
And we come to opening
and then
night.
you come to opening night.
And everybody's nervous.
And everyone is so nervous. But
Are they
you've
really?
had...
Is everybody really
Well,
nervous?
what-
Are you nervous?
I'm terribly nervous. I'm terrified because I don't like giving bad news. I'm good at giving bad news, but I don't like giving bad news. And being a perpetual pessimist when it comes to the overnight critics, I expect the worst.
Oh.
And then it can only be better.
Yes.
No, but there's this sort of strange period because the critics now come over 3 or 4 nights.
Oh.
It's sort of tense for the performers for an extended period. It's not just that pressure on one night, which I think most actors prefer.
One night.
No,
Like
I
it
do
spread
actually
out.
think it's spread out
Oh.
because there is that feeling that everyone is there that one night.
Right, and if I
my family's there and the critic
made a
from the New York
mistake
Times is
one
there.
night, it's-
And
yeah.
right, and so it just makes that so intense.
Yeah.
Now what happens is you have 3 or 4 performances, and there's this sort of magical thing. We never tell the company when the major critics are in. But
I often wondered if they knew.
But,
if
well,
you were
it's-
saying tonight the Times
No,
is coming
no,
to be really good.
No, we go to great efforts not to. We use sort of code names for people and that sort of thing on lists. So
Do you tell them that famous people are in the audience? Do you say tonight
it depends.
someone is
It
coming?
depends on who the stars are, because if sometimes they like to hear that, and other times they don't.
Okay.
But we will use pseudonyms for the Times
Psychology
critics.
again, you need. Okay.
And so you're. Inevitably, the director will call the day after the Times has been in, when they don't know who's in, saying, "Oh, that was a terrible show last night. The Times is in, right?" And it's without fail. Whatever preview, those last previews that the Times comes to, is always the worst performance we've ever done. So we're standing outside giving out tickets for 3 nights, 4 nights prior to the actual opening night.
And you decide where everybody sits.
There is a rough, yes, and there is a protocol. It is built around the critics with the most circulation with their newspapers or most visibility, or it's not particularly scientific, and a lot of it is based on egos, which again, that is one thing you do learn with experience.
Dealing with egos.
Dealing with or respecting the egos. I mean, the critic wields a lot of power to a very specific audience, which is your audience. So it would be crazy to antagonize them unnecessarily. You leave that up to the show. But going in, their experience should be a comfortable experience.
Right.
So you try and give them a lot of information. We always try and give background information that is not preachy, but will actually help understanding. By that I mean, if the playwright is a first-time playwright, what their background is. If the playwright has had hits before, reminding them of the shows they've had. If it's a revival, we always give the critics background information on previous productions because it's helpful to them. And we don't necessarily want them to refer to the old productions, but they're going to. So why not help by having that information there so that they feel that the process is smooth?
So your part of your job is research, in-depth
a lot of
research.
research, and which I also adore. I mean, I think I'm fascinated by it. So, but I do think I have no illusion to the fact that we can influence what the reviews are beyond what's on stage. But I do feel that at least we'll have a more considered opinion. It won't be the process of going to the theatre that sets someone off. It will actually be what's on stage that is reviewed. And I think it's very important to keep thinking about that, the environment of theatre, especially in Times Square now, which is it's a very vibrant but also challenging environment. It is so crowded, it is so tiring in many ways. And these poor dears have to go to, in April, 3 or 4 shows a week, and they're burnt out. So anything that we can do to make that experience more comfortable, I think is very important, and for the consumer too. I think it's something that we aren't always very good at with the commercial theatre. We are so obsessed with having the hot ticket and having people standing online to buy the hot ticket. We forget that there's a whole other industry around that is relying on people who just love theatre and want to see a show, and who don't necessarily want to go through the aggravation of standing in line for 2 hours.
You mentioned that in your organization you have intern programs.
Yep.
How does one become an intern? You have to be in college, don't you,
Not
to get the
necessarily.
credit?
No, I mean, sometimes we put out an alert on Playbill Online saying we're looking for interns,
so
and
if
people
people
can
are
come
looking
for
for
the summer.
these jobs, they
Yep.
could then be looking in playbills.
Yeah.
Other companies would be listing that they're looking for apprentices? or-
Playbill Online every now and then will run listings for looking for apprentices for various offices.
Okay, and Playbill is the program that's handed out
Right.
at a theater performance.
Yeah, but not to plug them too much, but playbill.com is a very important place for getting easy information. There's a lot of other theatrical websites. They were the first, which is not necessarily say they're the best, but they were the first to get out there, just to know what's going on in the theatre.
You mentioned an apprentice program with a union.
At PAM, our union has this apprentice program.
This is the press, public relations.
The Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers,
And they
which is my
have-
union.
Your
which-
union has an
which has an apprentice program, which is a 2 to 3 year program where you work in an office on a Broadway show or an off-Broadway show with the guidance of a member. And at the end of it, there's a test. There's seminars along the way. And it's a test of phone numbers and how to write a press release.
Oh, really?
It's
Can
like
you tell right away who's going to make a good press representative?
You know what? We figure we can tell in about a month. It takes that long, and there's a certain aptitude of, again, that fascination with the media, fascination with research. It is obsessive. It is obsessive behavior, but hopefully socially excessive.
But this is a good way to use your obsessive behavior in a
absolutely.
productive
I think it is.
way.
It is sometimes almost nerdy, but no, it is an obsession with detail.
There's a lot of study that involved. When opening night comes, and it's a good play, are you as overjoyed as everybody else?
I am. It's more relief, but no, and that's something else that we all have to fight too. Is that just the relief of getting it open is so great, but to actually really enjoy the moment. Because when a show is successful, it is really exciting. When the phones the next morning are ringing off the hooks because people want to get tickets or want to do stories on it, that is really exciting. And it doesn't happen a lot.
No.
I mean, they say that 8 out of 10 new commercial products, like new soap powders or whatever, fail.
Oh.
We almost have a higher success rate on Broadway now. And we should relish that.
Is there one that sticks out in your mind that you...
Well, it's always the last one.
Which is?
I'm very happy that 42nd Street is doing so well. It came in, everyone said, why 42nd Street again? And I've always loved the musical. I mean, it did open 20 years ago, but everyone saying, why again? And I said, but it's so much fun. And it's turned out to be that. And the public has found that. And the press has found that. And that's great. And that's very invigorating. And it does leave you, though, thinking there's always something else you can do. Mm-hmm. And that is the quality that you look for in someone who wants to be a press agent, is always when the good reviews or the good word of mouth or the good ticket sales come in and the show is doing really well, but they're always thinking, okay, what else can we do? The job is never done.
So you don't rest on your laurels.
No, but because we all know that then the next big show comes in, and suddenly you're old news, and then it becomes more about, so you have to be very sort of tricky and clever about how you can make a story, how you can work around it, and I think that's always it, knowing that getting satisfaction out of the fact the job can never be completely done.
Did you ever want to be an actor?
I didn't want to be an actor. Never.
Director?
I so admire actors. I so admire their commitment. I so admire their absolute passion and ego in place to have the confidence to do that. I think it's wonderful.
But you have to have some of those qualities too yourself.
Yeah, we do. But I think we represent the production. It's not personal when we're rejected. I mean, it's hateful, but it's not personal. And to take that bruising, I think it's extraordinary. I like designers. I love designers.
Oh yes, the set.
I think people like Tony Walton, and I think they are so creative, and the limitations. I mean, the whole thing about theatre is its collaboration and limitation, and what they can do and what they can achieve, and the magic they can create, is extraordinary to me. I love it.
Maybe you should be a designer.
Oh. No,
You're perfectly suited for what you do, perhaps.
I think I am. I like that I don't know how every day is going to be. I like that there's something about every element of the job that is just intriguing to me. Every relationship with every, as I say, designer, actor, producer, member of the press. It's great.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure talking to
Thank
you,
you.
Adrian.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. Thank you.
The American Theater Wing's Guide to Careers in the Theater is a project of the American Theater Wing and the New York Public Library's Billy Rose Theater Collection, Theater on Film and Tape Archive.